Primary school age children shouldn't have any access to smartphones. It's been shown to increase the likelihood of them being diagnosed with ADHD, with autism, increase the likelihood of mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, stress.
Dr. Mark.
Dr. Mark.
Professor Mark Williams.
Professor of Cognitive Neuroscience.
Presented the latest research on all of this. Are smartphones making us dumb? Well, this is pretty terrifying stuff. Answer your own question. Are they?
Alan, I think they really are. We're getting addicted to them, and we're more and more addicted to them. And the information that's on them is biasing what we see and what we perceive. And then they shouldn't be on social media, right? TikTok and these things. It's been shown that pedophiles are using these things to capture girls. Yeah, wow. It's been shown that girls spending up to 3 hours on TikTok, increased likelihood of having body dysmorphic issues. The best thing for the health of our body is to socialize with someone. It's better for you than any drug that we have. There's no drug on the market which is as good for mental health as actually sitting down chatting with someone. I wasn't a very studious kid. My mother had mental issues and self-medicated, and so I was actually one of those bad kids teachers avoided. My principal actually told myself and my father when I was 16 that I'd be dead or in prison by the time I was 25. So yeah, I was pretty much a rat bag. And I hated school. Ironically, it was when I was 25, decided to go back to school. Two of my friends had had drug overdoses and I wanted to do something different. There was a physics teacher there that actually convinced me that I had something worthwhile to offer and convinced me to go to university.
You also offer certain brain hacks that people can use to improve their brain health. So how can people detach from that addictive nature of these devices, use it in a mindful way, and just find that balance?
My first tip is always...
Welcome to Curiousolic, the podcast where we learn from the past and people's story, all in the goal to become better people and also to see and raise awareness of the dangers that lie ahead in our future. Today, we have a special guest coming from Australia, a neuroscientist named Dr. Mark Williams, who is a brain health expert, a teacher in productivity and learning. He has helped many people around the world, from teachers, business leaders, directors, in performing better in their field while teaching them specific brain hacks and a better understanding of how their brain works. He also has an upcoming book coming out this summer, August 15th, 2023. It's called The Connected Species, How the Evolution of the Human Brain Can Save the World.
Yeah. So in today's episode, we're definitely going to be learning how to improve our future. Mark is going to help us get through the dangers that, new technologies are presenting to our brain health and, what to look out for and how we could kind of like circumvent all those, issues going on.
Yep. So, Mark, thank you for coming on our show. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me.
So before we get into the more interesting discussions and conversations, I want to start by, an interesting question. Why choose neuroscience? What was, something maybe when you were young that intrigued you to pursue this field and study the human brain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually, I wasn't a very studious kid. I grew up in a small country town. My mother had mental illness issues and self-medicated herself. And so I was actually one of those bad kids that teachers avoided. Back then, of course, there was corporal punishment here in Australia, so we used to get a strap or the cane. So I used to avoid that by going fishing and smoking pot down a lake. I wasn't studious at all. I'd never actually thought about getting into science or even going to university. And my principal actually told myself and my father when I was about 16 that I'd be dead or in prison by the time I was 25. I was pretty much a rat bag. And I hated school. Ironically, it was when I was 25 that I decided to go back to school and get my HSC, my final year, so that I could, I wanted to get a decent job. Two of my friends had had drug overdoses, and I wanted to do something different. So I went back to school, and there was a physics teacher there that actually convinced me that I was actually had something worthwhile to offer, and convinced me to go to university. I went to university and I did science, and I ended up doing a double major in physiology in the medical faculty and psychology in the science faculty, which is how I ended up with a cognitive neuroscience degree. And I think it was an interest in my family background, what was going on there, and interest in myself. It was pretty ironic also. I mean, the first year of university was very early on, and we started having to submit things on computer. You know, it seems strange now that it was new to have to submit things on computer. And so there was computer labs where you went and you hired a computer for an hour or two. But the banks then saw that as a real opportunity, so they were giving loans to students to actually buy their own computer so they could have it at home, so you could do your thing. So I took out one of those loans, which was a pretty stupid idea because I didn't have a lot of money, and of course I had to pay the loan back. But I also at the same time bought the computer game Doom, and started playing on my computer. And I was like had the same addictive personality as my mother, so I got addicted to that very quickly, and I actually failed the first year of university because I just spent hours and hours and hours playing Doom rather than actually going. And I had to go to the board and actually beg for them to let me back in for another year because I'd failed the first year. So, I think from there it was just this, what's going on with me, and why am I so addicted to things, and so why is my mother got all the issues she's got, and why is it, and so that's what really got me into it. It was the why questions and seeing how our brains work.
So it was almost like a teacher that kind of helped you turn your life around in that way and make it into a positive thing, which is a cool thing. It was a way of actually understanding the brain, so they could understand what was going wrong with me, so they could improve it in myself and try to improve it in other people. Trying to help your own family is not a good idea. It doesn't work. But helping yourself's a good idea. Yeah.
Oh, you're doing good.
Great, yeah. So can you explain what is neuroscience, maybe to someone like us, for example, that doesn't really know that much about neuroscience? What is it? Why is it really important to learn about it, and how it could help people grow?
Yeah, so neuroscience itself is a huge field because neuroscience goes everything from the cellular level of the brain all the way through to the whole macula, to how that brain works. And so it's a huge field, and everyone specialises in different areas. My area is cognitive neuroscience, which is just basically looking at wake humans' brains, how a normal human, when they're awake, actually works, rather than you looking at animal models or looking at cellular level or looking at damaged brains and so on. So I look at cognitive neuroscience. So I look at humans, and what we're doing, most of what we do is neuroimaging. So it's either MRI, which you probably heard about. Most people who have had a sports injury or something have had an MRI. So we use MRIs, and we take pictures really quickly over a long period of time while people are doing things, and try and look at what's actually happening in the brain while they're doing different things to work out how different areas of their brains work. And then there's also EEG, which I've used a lot, which is looking at the electrical signals that are coming off the brain to then interpret what the brain's actually doing while they're doing different things. So those are the two main techniques we use.
Okay. So you're focusing more on cognitive neuroscience. Can you name a couple more, like fields of interest in neuroscience, or are you mostly familiar with that one?
Yeah, no, there's lots. So I go to the Society for Neuroscience conference every year, and there's usually about between 25 and 35,000 scientists there. So it's a huge event. And you have everything there from cellular neuroscience. These are the guys that look at the actual inside the neurons and the chemicals and how that all works. You then have systems neuroscientists that look at the whole system and how the system actually works as a whole, rather than just looking at a human brain. So they'll look at animals and at humans. You have single cell recording, people who do single cell recording. So they're the people that work with mice and monkeys and rats, and they actually look at the single neurons. So they'll actually inject an electrode into the brain and look at each neuron and how each neuron actually works, which is a fascinating area, but I could never do it myself. But I've got colleagues who do it, and we get a lot of information, really important information from it, but at the same time it's the actual practical side of it's not much fun. I don't think that they enjoy it.
That's interesting. I think what you're doing is really cool and interesting as well. So what is the difference, and what's more important in your opinion, to have proper brain health or physical health, or is it just as important to have both? Because I know a lot of people, tend to focus on the physical health, and some people almost like omit the brain health, and they forget how important it is.
I think one of the issues we have in society is that we separate the two out. And I think, the brain is actually just another part of the body. And so having body health, having physical health means you've got a good brain as well, right? It's part of your body. And so therefore we should be thinking about the whole thing as a whole. I also, because I work a lot with students and areas where there's a lot of poverty, I often start off by talking to those kids about the fact that to be an elite athlete, you've got to have an amazing brain as well, because your brain controls your body, right? And so it controls all your muscles, it controls all the movement, it controls the decisions you make on the field, it controls your stress, whether, before the game and after the game and during the game, it controls the decisions that you're actually making on the game. So if you look at any elite athlete, they're actually got really, really good, healthy brains, and they spend a lot of time actually doing that. So to be an amazing athlete, you've actually got to have a healthy brain as well, otherwise you can't move your body well, you can't make decisions well, and you can't keep your stress levels down, and you can't do all those things. So I think the two things really go hand in hand, and I think we need to be more aware of that, and also they interact with each other. So to have a healthy brain, you've got to have a healthy vascular system, because you've got to have good blood flow to your brain. You've got to be eating well, because you've got to have all the nutrients going to your brain. You've got to have the oxygen going to your brain, so you've got to have a good cardiovascular system as well. So, the two things to me go hand in hand, and you do see, the healthier you are physically, usually, the healthier you are mentally, often. Well, not often, not always. There are cases where, people are taking silly drugs to improve their physical health, and it doesn't.
The athlete thing, I myself, I'm a power lifter, and I compete in powerlifting. I did a few competitions last year, and I gotta say, like, the mental aspect is almost just as important as the physical, right? You go into a competition, a lot of nerves come in, and you need to make sure that your head is at the right place when you're about to compete, and I think that's a good point that you bring there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to get everything working right? You got it all go. You've got a motor program in your brain that sets off that powerlifting response that actually lifts the weight. And if that goes, as we know, if that goes wrong, you can damage yourself pretty severely, fairly quickly, if you're off kilter anyway. And that's all controlled by your brain. That's not controlled by your muscles. That's controlled by your brain, actually deciding which muscles are going to contract and which ones are going to relax at any one point in time.
Yeah, there's all those neural pathways, and all those patterns that you teach your body to move in a certain way, for sure.
But like you said, it's we need to look at it in a holistic way, and I think a lot of times healthcare is always specialized on one part of the body instead of looking at the whole. Kind of how the neuroscience is more like a team science. Everyone is working on one part of it, but they all come together to help each other. Yeah. So is the brain and the body.
We've got to be aware of all the other stuff that's going on. Yeah, sorry I interrupted you there. But we've got to be aware of all the other parts to it. I remember, just as an example, about 10 years ago, I was body surfing. I love surfing. I love being in the water. I'm in the water a lot. It was a big day. There was a big swell. I decided to go out body surfing because it was crashing. It wasn't good for surfing, but I thought I would go out there and do some body surfing. And I had my arm out, and my arm got dug into the sand, and I got flipped over, which means that my shoulder got dislocated, just sort of like you pull off a chicken wing, and it ended up down halfway down my ribs. So I went to the hospital, and I had to do surgery, put it back into where it was actually should be, and so on. And then I was then sent to a shoulder surgeon and a shoulder specialist to see whether I'd need more surgery and to do rehab and everything. And I kept complaining because my elbow was really, really sore whenever I did any of the rehab, because the rehab took forever because I'd ripped all the muscles and so on. And it wasn't until about 6 months later that I went and saw a chiropractor. And I'm not saying chiropractors are any better than doctors, but I went to the chiropractor. He looked at my whole body, and he went, actually your elbow is still dislocated, and that's why it's so painful. And he put it back in. He put my elbow back in, and straight away it was like relief. I had this pain relief. But all this, the shoulder specialist had been telling me, it's just referred pain from your shoulder, because he was a shoulder specialist and all he was looking at was the shoulder. So for 6 months I had a dislocated elbow because the shoulder specialist didn't look past the shoulder, which, is a great example of all these individuals who have all these specialties, and that's all they look at, and they don't look at the whole body. And I think we need to think more about the whole body, and how it all interacts and how it's all important for each part of it.
So you went to the hospital and they completely missed that your elbow was dislocated as well. Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I find.
Yeah, that's a weird. Okay. Yeah, so I guess sometimes it's important to consider all the other disciplines, right? A lot of people just think that it's the hospital is the best answer, but there are other disciplines out there that know the human body well also, right? Like chiropractors, for example. Mm-hmm. So how much capacity does the brain have for change, like neuroplasticity, especially in adults? So I know, like for kids, like their brains are easily adaptable and they change rapidly and they learn really fast. Is there like a certain point in adults where there's almost like a point of no return? Is there like a point where we're kind of screwed and we're stuck at that place and we can't get back to like baseline with our brain? Or is there always an ability to come back to that baseline?
Yeah, great question. It's been fascinating because over the last 20 years or so, we've come to realize that we used to think that based on a lot of Piaget's theories, that we had these critical periods when we were young, and we went through these critical periods. If you didn't get to it, if you didn't learn a certain ability by a certain age, then you could never learn that ability, and then you sort of get stuck at that level and you would never move on. And then once you got to about 20 years old, your brain was then stuck the way it was, and that's the way you were forever. And then you had these IQ, that you could measure, and once you measured that, that's your IQ for the rest of your life, and all these things. We now know none of that's true. It was all a load of crock. So our IQ changes huge amounts over our lifetime. Neuroplasticity, our brain changes constantly throughout our life, and we can continually change it. And so now they've shown one of Piaget's theories was that if you didn't hear or you didn't start learning a particular language before the age of, I think it was 7 or 8, then you would never become a fluent speaker in that language. They've now taught 70-year-olds a completely new language, and they've taught it to the level where a native speaker couldn't tell that they weren't fluent native speakers in that language. So all of that stuff is now shown as silly and not actually true. So we can actually change our brain, and our brain does constantly change. So, but we've got to remember that it's changing both positively and negative. I think of it as use it or lose it, just like our muscles. And so the areas or the abilities that we're using get stronger, and the bits that we're not using, they slowly atrophy. So we've got to remember that we're losing the bits that we're not using, and we make stronger the bits that we are using. So we want to exercise it all the time, and keep it really strong. But yeah, you can change it any time. Your IQ, even during your adult years, your IQ changes dramatically. So this idea of taking an IQ test and that's what you're going to be is really silly. All it tells you is your IQ right at that point in time, and then it's all changes, which is awesome for people like me who want to keep getting better.
Get better, yeah, of course, because life is about getting better until the day you die. You shouldn't just be set in your ways, and it's a self-defeating mindset. If you think, oh, this is my IQ, then that's who I am.
I'm not smart, or I can't do anything in life. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Always try to improve, I guess, for sure.
Yeah. So the brain definitely is plastic. It can change.
Yeah. So I guess that's very good news for people.
But I'm guessing, children have a higher plasticity than adults, because they're able to learn languages faster, or skills and whatnot. Maybe adults need to put more effort, do you think? Certain habits can be tough to break through, right?
Yeah, so because a child, like all of our different parts of our brain are still developing during the childhood years and teenage years, and even up into the early adult years. So our prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until we're about 25 years of age. So all of those areas are still developing. So of course, then when they're doing that developing, going through those developmental stages, it's much easier to change those things than later on in life. But we can still change them later in life. It's just a little bit more difficult. So yeah, there are things. But also, kids also can have more difficulty learning particular things because they don't have the background knowledge to actually learn those. So, it'd be really hard to teach a child, I don't know, it'd be hard to...
Like hard math or something.
Yeah, some sort
Difficult
of,
math,
algebraic
yeah.
maths or something without first teaching them all the basics of maths, right? So, although it seems as though they're a sponge and they can learn more, they can learn more, but they have less knowledge, so therefore the complexity of what they can learn is less. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see.
That makes sense. Yeah, it needs to be in increments. Evolution.
Yeah.
I guess they also have to be like in a proper environment, right, in order for them to learn better. Like, for example, if the parents are giving a bad example to the kids, I guess their brain is going to kind of converge to maybe having bad behaviors in the future. Or am I wrong about that? So, for example, if like there's like parents that are drug addicts or alcoholics, right? Isn't there like a tendency for kids to end up having more of those bad habits in the future just because of their parents?
Yeah, we learn what's around us, right? We learn what we see, we learn what we observe. And so we're only going to be as good as what we observe, which is, what all my book's about, right? Is that we are a connected species and we learn from all those around, those that we're connected with. And so those that we actually trust and we're connected with, we learn really, really easily from. And those that we're not connected with, we don't learn from. So, there's a lot of stuff now about having to have people in the media who, are good role models for different groups and all of these sorts of things. But that doesn't really work unless there's kids actually feel connected to them, actually feel as though they're part of their group. And so if they don't actually, if they feel like, that person comes from, over there and I'm never going to be like them, then they're never going to feel like they can actually attain that, whatever it happens to be. So the people around you are really the people that actually influence you the most, and therefore that's what you're most likely to end up like.
Yeah. And nowadays, kids are more and more exposed to different types of people, different groups and communities, ever more than they were, even like, 30 years ago or whatnot. A lot of kids were in more local communities, and now they have more access. And to kind of segue into another topic here that we want to talk about is some of the dangers that lie with the technologies that we use, especially when it comes to kids using them. In your view, what technologies or devices do you think are the most damaging to the human brain, and why?
Easily the smartphone, and the cell phone, smartphone, whatever you want to call it, that thing that we all have in our back pocket or our front pocket, or the thing that we can't actually live without. It's causing huge issues in society. And it's not the actual phone itself, right? It's only a piece of technology, and it's an amazing piece of technology, and we could do amazing things with it. But unfortunately, the way they're set up means that we're getting addicted to them, and we're more and more addicted to them. And the information that's on them is biasing what we see and what we perceive. And because we become like what we see a lot of and what we perceive a lot of, right? And so the stuff that we get fed through those algorithms to keep us on those devices is really causing a lot of issues in society, and they're designed to be addictive. So we need to change that, and you can change that very easily, and I think it's a time that we stepped up and actually started changing that. We've also got, of course, an issue of not learning the right things. Before we talked about the fact that it's use it or lose it, but you've got to learn how to communicate, and you've got to learn how to actually socialize, and the most important thing for us as humans is actually socializing. We didn't become the alpha species because we're the strongest animal out there, or we're the fastest animal out there, or we're have the biggest brain, or any of those things. We actually became the alpha on the world and managed to infiltrate every aspect of this beautiful Earth, because we're connected, because we collaborate, because we actually work across groups. So
Very true.
we're the only species that works across groups. So you think of ant colonies or bee colonies, beehives. A beehive is extremely complicated, and there's thousands and thousands of bees in a beehive. But one beehive won't interact with another beehive. One beehive won't turn around and go, "Oh, there's some really good flowers over there. You should go and pick them." Or we've got some extra honey this season. Do you want some? And then you give us some of your whatever, right? We do that. We're the only species that does that, And that's what's meant that we've actually got to work to the point we're at the moment. But that requires us to actually communicate with each other and collaborate with each other and understand all those things. And unfortunately, because kids are spending so much time on devices, they're not learning how to do that, because you don't do that on device. You do that face to face. And it's difficult and it's hard. Yeah. And that's why we have so much social anxiety in the world at the moment, and why we have so much depression and stress.
There is some opinion on that regarding, smartphone usage, and what would be your opinion? Should kids be exposed to these technologies? Should it be sort of completely banned to a certain age? Should there be a limit to how much they use? How do we control that? The usage of those devices?
Yeah, I think primary school age children shouldn't have any access to them, to smartphones. I don't think giving a child in primary school a smartphone has been shown to increase the likelihood of them being diagnosed with ADHD, increase the likelihood of them being diagnosed with autism, decrease the likelihood of them actually being successful at school, decrease the likelihood of them having friends at school, and it increases the likelihood of mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, stress. So, giving a kid at primary school a device, they don't yet have the cognitive ability. I mean, I hear people turn around and say, but hang on, we've got to give them these things so that they can actually learn how to use them. But we don't teach kids, hey, you shouldn't eat too much sugar, and then give them a huge big bowl of sugar and say, you can have this in your room and you can eat as many as you like, but you've got to control it because sugar's not good for you, right? And then we'll fill up that bowl full of lollies whenever you want that bowl filled up, whenever you eat all the lollies, right? But that's what we're doing with the smartphones. We give them smartphones and just say, yeah, go for it. You can watch the pornography and you can watch TikTok, which we know has got all these viral things on there, and we know it's got pedophiles on there, and we know it's got all these other, and we're not going to monitor them. That's just crazy. So yeah, I think primary school we shouldn't be giving kids smartphones. When they get to high school, I think it's probably okay as long as there's a lot of restrictions around it, and as long as we turn off all of the notifications, because it's the notifications that actually cause a lot of the stress. So if you turn all the notifications on those things and just have them as an old school phone where they can actually answer the phone, and then if they want to actually check their email, they can, but they just schedule that in. We should all do that, right? Because the notifications are what is capturing our attention and what's actually destroying a lot of our lives. And it's been shown if you do turn off the notifications, you actually increase your mental health within about 2 weeks. Yeah. So just by turning off all your notifications, you'll actually increase your mental health within about 2 weeks. Okay. So we should all have those turned off because that's their tricks to actually capture our attention. And then they shouldn't be on social media, right? TikTok and these things, it's been shown that the pedophiles are using these things to capture girls. It's been shown that girls spending only 2 or 3 hours on TikTok or on these other social media programs increased likelihood of having body dysmorphic issues such as anorexia nervosa, anorexia bulimia. Boys are also having those issues as well, so there's a huge increase in boys having body dysmorphic issues, and therefore spending huge hours in the gym and trying to build themselves up and trying to get hold of breast milk so that they can get stronger and all these sorts of things.
And
so
taking anabolic steroids.
Anabolic
steroids as well.
Which causes really big problems. Huge problems in society because of all those things. So keep them off social media and just allow them to have the phone, but for ringing people and then maybe for texting their friends so that they can catch up, and have all the notifications turned on.
Yeah, so like a lot of restrictions should be put on the phone, and parents should monitor, not just willy-nilly pass the phone, because it has become, the tablet generation, right? Oh, my baby's crying. Let me just pass the tablet, go on YouTube,
give him something
games
to stay entertained and keep his mind off his
Which
problems.
is really scary. We now, there's a disorder over in the US we now know called the still face effect, where toddlers have still faces. They don't use their facial expressions. They look like little dolls because they don't actually perceive and they don't use facial expressions because they haven't actually learned how to use them. And the more a carer is on a smartphone, the more likely the child is to have still face effect. And the more they've given, the devices at cafes and all these things, the more likely they are to have the still face effect. But we also know there's now evidence that kids that learn how to read on a device have abnormal white matter tracts. So the white matter tracts are the corpus callosum and the other areas that connect all the areas of the brain together. And it's been shown that kids that actually learn how to read on a device have abnormal white matter tracts. So their brains are actually abnormal because of the fact that they've learned how to read on a screen. So all these schools that are introducing in primary school devices, so-called, to get the students to learn better, actually causing abnormal development of their brains.
So just off of reading on a screen versus like on a paper, that affects the development of the brain?
That's right, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Okay. And you mentioned that, kids that are in primary school, they should avoid having cell phones and being on social media, and kids that are in high school, they could start using those. Why is that? Why is there a difference there? Is it because kids in primary school are still in the early stages of development and they're, again, back on that neuroplasticity thing, they're easily influenceable? Or is it because they don't know how to control themselves, like you mentioned as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, both those things. Well done. Yeah, you hit on both of the issues. One is they're not at a developmental stage yet where they can control those things, and so we need to wait until they're at an age where they're mature enough to actually control and have better control over those things. But also they're still developing these things, and so we need to be aware of that and control that what they're actually seeing. They need to have a diverse range of things that they're seeing. And in China, in several provinces in China, they've now made it illegal for you to give a smartphone to a child, I think under the 13, because the
Really?
medical issues associated with it. Because if you in the first years of life, your actual back of your eyeball is, and that develops through experience. And because kids are looking at things close to them all the time, they don't have the experience of looking far away as much as they should, and so the eyeball develops incorrectly, and so they actually end up legally blind because they're looking at things close to them all the time. So in China, because of the impact of that on their medical system, they've actually made it, they're restricting it. Now, we're not doing that in Western countries yet, but maybe we should start thinking about that, because we have got an increase in people needing to wear glasses because of the fact that they're not developing normal eye shape.
So it affects the eyesight as well.
There are issues.
Yeah.
We've also got a huge decrease in bone density in kids in the last 10 years. So bone density is going down. It's been going down by about 10% every year in children because of the fact they're not moving. So your bone density actually develops because you're actually moving around. You're using your muscles. You would know, being a power lifter, right? The more you power lift, the stronger your bones get as well as your muscles, so that you can actually lift more. And because kids aren't actually doing physical exercise, they're not actually developing their bones in the same way. So therefore, then they're getting weaker bones, which means that they're more likely to damage their bones and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So again, there are brain consequences and there are also physical consequences, as we could see, right? I mean, kids are not getting healthier just by sitting on their couch and playing games all day. That's another thing, right? Video games is another thing that. Do you think that's another one that kids should avoid as well? Because I know it's very popular.
Yeah. I used to play.
I think
we all. I think we all are.
You need to, I don't think you need to completely avoid it. I think you just need to restrict it so that it actually is a certain amount. So I have two teenagers, and my teenage boy loves to do gaming. So he's allowed to game for an hour every Saturday, and he does that with his mates, right? And so they do it for an hour every Saturday, which is sensible, right? It's a reasonable amount of time to do something. And that's it, and he's not allowed to do it anymore. But to be doing that every day, when we know that it's addictive, it's now part of DSM-5, so the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is the manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use, now have in it gaming disorder, which is alongside alcohol disorder, drug disorder, and gambling disorder, and they're all treated exactly the same. So the actual symptom of gaming disorder is exactly the same as drug disorder, and the recovery of it is just as difficult as drug disorder. So this is a significant effect that it's having on these kids, because you do get addicted to it, and because they get really addicted to it because they're designed that way. So we need to be aware of that and restrict it in the right ways. You've got to exercise your whole brain, and so to actually keep it healthy, and just sitting on a video game, we know increases stress, so therefore that's bad for you and bad for your brain. Increases cardiovascular system because you're sitting down all the time, you're not actually doing anything. And it is restricted in what you can actually do. So how's it making you more creative? Because it's actually designed to make you go through certain tunnels and certain ways and different levels and all the rest of it. It's not you being creative, that's some other person being creative and taking you on a little ride, right? So there's no evidence of any of that.
It's the programmer that's
the only thing
creative.
they do show is engagement. Yeah, so the only thing they do show on all of those things, whether it's the educational technology stuff and all the rest of it, they show engagement, right? They show, we're getting increased engagement from this, but engagement doesn't show learning and doesn't show that you're getting more intelligent. It just means that you're actually sitting there watching it. And just sitting there watching it doesn't mean that you're actually getting better at it.
I know some kids even like meet people online and they socialize with people. Is that, I guess, a good, like, for example, if someone is not social outside of video games, would you say that's at least a positive thing where some people could make friends online, or is that still a negative?
No, because you don't get the same response. So when we're doing things online, if we're like we're doing now, we get, well, you guys are set up well because I can actually see your whole body. But most of the time, it's like what I am, which is you can just see from your chest above, if that, or just your head. So if you're actually talking online, that's all the information you get. So what happens is you get a release of dopamine when you do this sort of thing online, because we like to be social. But dopamine isn't the only thing that we need when we actually communicate with each other. And our brains have actually evolved. We've evolved large brains to actually communicate, to actually collaborate, to actually keep to connect with each other. One thing that happens when we actually do it face to face that we don't get when we're online is you will touch each other. And there's, in all societies, there's some way of actually touching each other, which means that which is really important. So in more stoic societies like Australia and North America, well, parts of North America anyway, you'll shake hands so that you actually touch each other. In Europe and stuff, they'll kiss each other on each other's cheek. I think in Quebec they kiss each other on other's cheeks and so on. And even the Inuits in Canada, even the Inuits will rub noses, right? They'll rub noses because it's the only part of their body that's actually showing, And that's because we have C fibres, these special fibres on our skin as mammals, that are just there for touch. They're not there for any other reason. And so when we get touch of another species, another person or animal from our species or another species, it activates these C fibres, which activates an area of our brain and releases oxytocin. And oxytocin is extremely important for us to actually connect because it opens us up. It actually makes us more willing to connect to someone. It makes us trust them more, and it makes us believe that they're actually part of our group. They're actually someone we can trust and someone we can actually collaborate with. So touching someone is extremely important when you actually meet, and that's why, of course, politicians go out and shake everyone's hands and kiss the babies and do all that sort of stuff, because they know there's a release of oxytocin, which means these people are going to trust them, and they're going to trust them more by doing that. We also get serotonin when we're face to face, because when we're face to face, we start mimicking each other's body language. So we have an area of our brain called the mirror neuron system, and that system actually activates when we see someone else move. So if I'm pointing, for example, the area of your brain that would make you point activates as well, and that motor system actually goes off, the plan goes off, and the muscles in your hand get slightly activated associated with that. Now that means that you then understand that I'm pointing because you're doing the same thing, not actually doing it, but your area of your brain is activated to do that. But that also means that we then start mimicking each other. So if I see you, leaning over and looking quite depressed, then I'll start leaning over and looking quite depressed. And then that I understand that you're feeling quite depressed, because I then feel a little bit depressed in response to that, because I'm doing the same thing, which makes me feel a little bit depressed. And so we have a relationship with each other. We're actually communicating with each other through our body language automatically via that mirror neuron system. Now, again, you don't get that when you're online because most of us only see above our... And in actual fact, on social media, you're texting to each other. You're not actually even seeing each other, so you don't get any of that
even more
information when you're doing that. Yeah, so you're missing out on all those really, really important neurotransmitters when you're doing it online, which you don't get when you're actually doing it face-to-face. And then, of course, there's the prosody of the voice that's going on. There's also eye gaze. So if you and I we were all in the same room, and one of you wanted to talk, you would indicate to each other via your eye gaze, and to me via your eye gaze, that you wanted to talk, and the way you actually portray your face. That's really hard to do when you're online because you're all looking at each other. If I wanted to, indicate something about something in the room, I'd look at it and you'd look at it as well. But of course you can't look at it because you don't know what I'm looking at, because I'm in a completely different room to you. So you lose all that information as well. So there's a whole bunch. So when we're online, it's a really abnormal release of neurotransmitters. It's just a few neurotransmitters that aren't actually aren't as good for us by themselves. So, and I like in my book, actually, I talk about it in relation to either having a home cooked meal or having fast food, and doing stuff. Socializing online is like having a fast, going to a fast food restaurant. So it's really easy. You just drive in, they give you your food, you drive out, and you get really good hit of dopamine because there's sugar in it and there's fat in it and all those things. But then you feel sick usually afterwards, or you're hungry after half an hour and you need to go back more. And if you do that every day and that's all you actually eat, you're going to get really unhealthy after a short period of time, right? Whereas a home cooked meal, it's more difficult, it takes longer, but it's way more sustaining for you. You get all the nutrients that you actually need, which is really good. It'll sustain a longer period of time, and you'll be healthy long term. And that's the same as communicating online versus communicating face to face. One's short term burst of dopamine, and then that's it, and it's not really healthy for you. The other one is really sustaining, and you get this whole gamut of really important nutrients or neurotransmitters that'll sustain you over a long period of time.
Yeah,
wow, that's fascinating.
I think that's a really interesting thing. The thing you mentioned about online conversations. Sometimes I notice with these online interviews, it's actually hard to see when the other person's talking. I guess because they're not directly looking at each other.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, that was fascinating. What you said there. I mean, because like kids might think they are socializing online by just talking through a headset, but I guess talking is a bit better than texting. But the best is to actually be there face to face, see each other, touch each other, smell each other.
Smell each other as well. Yeah, those pheromones are really important. I didn't even touch on those, but you've also got a whole bunch of pheromones that are released that also, reconnect
everything,
you and all those sorts of things. Yeah, it's all really important. And you were talking about having a healthy brain and having a healthy body. We know that the best thing for us for the health of our body is, for the health of our mind and our body, is to socialize with someone. So if you want to exercise your brain, because our brains have actually evolved for us to connect, more of our brain is activated when we actually do connect. And when we sit down with someone face to face, or go for a walk with someone, or have a coffee or a beer or whatever with someone, more of our brain's active during that period than anything else we can do. So it's the best way to actually exercise your brain. And it will actually help maintain your brain longer. It's better for you than any drug that we have in relation to mental health. So there's no drug on the market which is as good for mental health as actually sitting down chatting with someone. So it's awesome, right? And we should be doing it way more often. But it's got to be face to face. It's got to actually be in person with them. And even better, organising a time to go for a walk with someone, because you get both, right? You get the exercise and you get the interaction, right, with the person. So you get both of those things going on at the same time, which is the best way to spend your day. So, which is easy too, right? Really easy. Call up a mate and go for a walk. What easy thing to do, and you're doing amazing things for your brain and for your body.
Yeah, 2 for 1.
And but one of the sad realities in our modern times is there's such an epidemic of loneliness, just people being lonely and not having that connection, and they try to find it online, but it's not a replacement for actual human contact and having a partner or someone loving in your family or anyone, a friend or a parent is, I know people, who live alone, who, yearn for that, and it can be tough.
Yeah, loneliness kills, right? Loneliness literally kills us. It's been now shown that if you have people in your life that you can trust and you can spend time with and you can just chat with, you stave off things like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, all these diseases that actually kill us eventually, by up to 10 to 15 years. So it actually extends your life just having people, and loneliness decreases or increases the likelihood of you having those diseases. So, we need people in our lives that we can actually trust, that we can actually sit down with, we can have a chat with, and we're losing that, and that's really sad. And loneliness in schools is at an all-time high. It's like tripled in the last 10 years. Kids feeling lonely at school, which is nuts, right? They've got all these kids around them, all these teachers around them, and they're feeling more lonely today than they ever have.
Yeah.
They're lonely.
These new technologies, they only exasperate the problem at hand, and I think there needs to be more of a disconnect from that than connecting ourselves to all of these devices and tech that we have. To kind of continue on, we kind of spoke about the video games and whatnot and online interactions. I think in our opinion that there is an even more insidious type of content that kids can fall upon, and that is pornography. And you did mention before, this can lead to a lot of damage to their brain. So what are the effects, like a child, because we know a lot of kids, prepubescent kids, they get exposed to this, and what can we do to prevent this also? I guess, is it again to control, parent, and put limitations? Sometimes it can be tough. Hey, look at this stuff that I found online, and they get hooked.
Yeah, and there's also, which we don't talk a lot about, but the problem of I've worked with multiple schools now where I've been brought in because the kids have been arrested by the police because they've been taking photos of each other and then putting them online, which is then then they get on the sex registry and they're pedophiles, and that's for the rest of their lives. And the kids are the same age as each other, so they didn't see any problem in it. But it's a normal thing to do now, which is just crazy. And of course, if the child's under the age of 17 or 16 or 18, depending on where you live, it's a really have devastating effects long term. But the problem with the pornography, but also all of the social media platforms and Google as well, is that they run algorithms in the background to keep you attending to it. And those algorithms, well, it depends on which one, but with the pornography, what they do is they work out what you're watching, what you keep watching, and then they'll then put the next video as being a little bit more extreme in that direction, whatever direction it happens to be, which means that a kid that went on to actually look just, to, people having sex in a normal way, which is natural, right? I mean, when I was a kid, we used to steal father's Playboys to have a look at what it was all about and all the rest of it, right? But that's all we really had access to.
The curious mind.
They'll go on to look and try to work out what's going on, right? Which is completely normal. But then the algorithm will pick them videos which are more extreme, and they're more extreme and more extreme. And a poor kid that went on there just to find out what sex is about, all of a sudden is in this awful, awful quagmire of, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say it's probably not an R-rated podcast, but stuff that's really, really not natural, right?
Yeah.
Really isn't appropriate for most kids. And I
abusive.
work with multiple psychologists who are now spending all their time working with teenagers, and these are kids who are 13, 14, 15, who are addicted to porn, and just spend hours and hours on really, really horrendous stuff. Not normal, sex between two individuals or even three individuals, right? It's like stuff that's really aggressive. And also in emergency wards now, we're getting this huge rise in teenage girls arriving because they've got anal tears, right? Because of that, because of damage there, and the damage that's been caused there, because that's what's expected now. And all of these sorts of that's horrendous. And we know boys who watch pornography are more likely to be violent towards women because that's what they see, and so that's what they think they're supposed to be doing. And so many times, again, I talk with school psychologists and psychologists who say boys come in and just say, well, I thought that's what she wanted. I thought that's what was expected. Or they get arrested for it, for rape, for example, and they're like, well, but that's what I saw on the pornography site, and so I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
It's not realistic.
Which is really sad. And it's not the kids' fault, you know. And so we need government legislation. That's what we need. We need the government to actually stand up, do something to actually control this. Because most of these sites, you don't even have to have any evidence that you're 18, right? I mean, these sites should be like going to a pub or a hotel where you have to, go in and you have to show ID and you have to prove that you're over 18, and they don't at all. And so, you know, and they need huge fines when they don't do that.
Yeah. And I think sometimes like kids even stumble upon like pornography even unintentionally, right? Let's say you're scrolling on TikTok and you see, you know, something you're not supposed to see, right? Like someone dancing in a certain way, whatever. That could almost be considered pornography in its own right, even though you didn't search for it necessarily. Yeah. So it's almost like we need to control the feeds.
Yeah,
TikTok, there's a lot of content that's provocative.
Yeah.
Yeah. TikTok now you can, I saw there's now pedophiles on TikTok who pay girls, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds on TikTok to do provocative dances for them and upload them on TikTok. And so you've actually got guys who are actually paying for 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls to do those provocative dances for them and then uploading them. And you can pay people on TikTok, which is nuts that that's allowed, right?
It's crazy.
That's the thing. And there are also platforms such as OnlyFans. I don't know if you've heard of it, where a lot of women use it to just prostitute themselves, and this is, you know, seen as like you know, freedom for them to make money on their own, and it might be safer than back in the older days where, you know, they had people managing them or whatnot. But still, you're just still contributing to that whole cycle of you know, the predators online, the pedophiles who just consume that content, and then you get other people, men or women, hooked on it, and it just keeps going, you know. It doesn't help the situation.
And some of these women are making like obscene amounts of money on OnlyFans, right? It's not like just a couple thousand, it's like millions of dollars, like
some of them,
taking pictures, and you know, there's some people that sign up to their pages and they just get paid just by, you know, taking pictures of themselves essentially. And I feel like, I don't know, that's just like a bad example, right? Like a lot of people are like, oh, why would I get a good job, or why would I do something productive with my life when I could just go on OnlyFans, take a selfie, and then get money and get paid that way? So it's crazy.
We need to start thinking about where we want to head as a society. You know, as a group, right? We need to all get together. And for some reason, governments aren't doing anything for their communities. At the moment, I think there's too much control by billionaires worldwide, by multinational tech companies that are controlling the message and controlling what's actually happening. And I think we as a society need to go, hang on, this is the way we want to go, not that way, and we need to stop this. You know, I mean, they're about making money. That's what they're all about. And
exactly.
Of course.
We've been sucked into that. Yeah.
Their interests are not necessarily aligned with our common health. You know, they have their own interest to protect, you know, and we can't put it in their hands to regulate this all the time. They won't. If we don't say anything, they won't. Yeah.
All they want is more money, right? It's then they see that opportunity, they'll take it for sure.
Yeah, just some stats. I mean, I saw ridiculous stats the other day that during COVID, the top 1%, top 1% of wealthiest people in the world tripled their wealth during COVID. And the bottom 50% of people halved their wealth during COVID. I mean, that's just how that, I won't say rude words, but how did that happen? And how did we allow that to happen? It's just
would have thought everyone got affected.
The riches got richer, and the other people just
poor got
poorer. That's unfortunate for sure. Maybe a question about the COVID thing. So I know you mentioned how like when people kind of self-isolate, that's like one of the worst things. Do you think, you know, during COVID when people were self-isolating, do you think people's mental health definitely, struggled from that? Like, what were the consequences of those lockdowns? And I know in Australia, you guys had it pretty hard, and here in Quebec as well, like the government was really strict with the lockdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, a huge amount of research now coming out because, of course, everybody, a lot of people in that area started researching it as soon as it started happening. It's huge. A lot of research showing that it did cause huge problems in society. And marital breaks-ups because they were spending too much time with each other went through the roof during that period. A lot of domestic abuse increased dramatically during that, both because of stress and of course because you're locked in with each other. Mental health issues went through the roof. Anxiety and depression went through the roof and still is going on because, our brains, as we talked about before, our brains use it or lose it. So if you're all of a sudden locked in and you're not actually using your brain to socialise, you're not going out and meeting people and hanging out with lots of people and all the rest of it, then you slowly lose those abilities. And a lot of people did lose those abilities, and now they're not going out and socialising because they can't, because they don't feel as though they can, because of the social anxiety that they now have associated with the fact that they were stuck inside and lost the ability to actually go out and socialise. And of course, they'll need to learn to do that again, but many of them aren't because of the fact that they've got social media and they're on devices and all the rest of it. So they're like, well, I don't need to go outside, and I don't need to go to work anymore because I can work from home. Which is also another big issue in society. And so therefore, I can hide away and I can let this thing get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it will only get worse the more time they spend at home by themselves. And as we talked about before, loneliness causes a whole bunch of physical problems as well as mental problems and increases the likelihood of you getting all these other awful diseases later on. So it's not a good way to go and not a good place to be.
So it's almost like we were, self-isolating each other, but it wasn't helping us on the mental side for sure.
No, not at all. Yeah. I mean, it was probably necessary for a short period of time, but we need to all now get out. We need, this idea that there's some new normal is absolute nonsense. We need to actually get back
nonsense.
to work.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we kind of went on a rant on those those technologies that are affecting our brain health, but there's recently, and especially this year, there's a new kind of technology and new technologies coming out that definitely affect our brain health. So there is AI and virtual realities that are coming out, and notably like ChatGPT, for example, that's coming out. And what are your opinions on those AIs that are coming out, and how would that affect our brain health, in your opinion?
The artificial intelligence thing, I think, is quite amusing because it's not artificial intelligence. There's nothing intelligent about those algorithms because they are simply algorithms based on support vector machines. And we've had those support vector machines learning algorithms around for 30, 40 years. The only thing that's changed is we've now got so much data that they actually look as though they're intelligent, but they're not. They're no more intelligent than they were 30 years ago. I was one of the first people to use those algorithms to analyse fMRI data and neuroimaging data when I was at MIT and published some work on that and did that for many, many years. So it's not actually intelligent because learning is not intelligence, right? You can get an amoeba to learn. You can get a slug to learn something. Intelligence is actually generating new idea, and those artificial intelligence algorithms used that they call artificial intelligence don't create any new ideas. What they do is they just regurgitate what's actually out there. They grab stuff from the internet, they grab stuff from
they're smart
memory banks and put it together and pretend to be intelligent. And there's a whole bunch of influencers out there that do the same thing, right? They pretend to be intelligent by re-spurting everybody else's ideas, and that's probably what we're confused about these artificial intelligence algorithms because we have a whole bunch of influencers that do the same thing, and so we think, they must be intelligent. They're not intelligent. So I'm not that concerned about it. I've played around with them. If I was a computer scientist, I'd be a little bit concerned because they're amazing at actually generating code. So and if I was a parent who'd spent thousands of dollars on getting my kid to go to coding camps and all these sorts of things, so that they could become a coder when they were later on, I'd be concerned there because these things are really good at creating code and really, really good at programming for you, and that's not an area that's been discussed at all, which is funny, because that's an area that it will completely take over, I think, and I've done that a few times on there, and it does that really well. But as far as like writing, it's not really that. I don't think it's that interesting, and it's not. It's just mimicking what's there, so it's not actually producing anything new. Whereas a writer or an author will create new ideas and create new thought and create new ways of thinking about things. And so that the real writers and the real authors and that won't be affected by this as much as people think they will be at the moment. For universities and for schools, it's just going to make them a little bit more honest, right? They're actually going to have to, give students written tasks, and then they're going to have to mark them themselves to make sure that they're not using these ChatGPT or whatever to actually write those essays. But you can tell the difference. There's been lots of things on the YouTube and stuff where people have competed with the ChatGPT to see whether or not they can tell which one was written by a person, which one was written by ChatGPT, and the people are really good at picking up the one that's ChatGPT versus the one that's actually a real person. Because it's just boring. So I'm not that concerned about it. Sorry. I'd be concerned if I was computer science.
That's okay. It's a good way to look at it, because I know a lot of there's a lot of fear mongering going on, and a lot of people are worried about it. Personally, I was a little worried about it, and I think we all have a little maybe concern about it. But it's good that we're clearing it up and to see maybe that it's not that bad in that sense.
Yeah, maybe because it's still in its early stages, wouldn't it one day, let's say like 50 years from now, could AI be indistinguishable from, some of the things that we would create?
We need there needs to be a big leap in our in what the understanding or how it's actually programmed. At the moment, we're only playing around with support vector machines. So basically what they do is you feed them a lot of data and you tell them this is this category and this is this category. So learn how to tell those two categories apart. And then this is this category. And learn how to tell those two categories apart. Learn what a noun is versus a verb. Learn what a thing is versus a thing. And then these are all the rules associated with that. So now put it all together based on all this stuff that you've learned, based on all the stuff that we've inputted to you. And that's not intelligence, because intelligence requires an extra level. It requires metacognition, and it requires the ability to come up with new concepts and new ideas. So, the programs that we've currently got will never be able to do that, because that's not what they do. They just learn what's out there and then regurgitate it, and learn what's out there based on what you're inputting. So we need some sort of quantum leap in those programs to actually get to the point where it is a worry. And yes, if we did come up with artificial intelligence, if we really did come up with then I'd be worried. I'd be seriously worried.
Okay.
Because then
so you're saying
currently you're not worried.
Yeah.
No, with what we've got at the moment isn't artificial intelligence, so I'm not worried. If we do come up with artificial intelligence, I'll be the first one that'll be signing up to close it all as quickly as possible, because then it's a problem. Then it's a huge problem.
You're saying right now, like the AI that we have is more like a data collection tool that's able to kind of regurgitate the correct information rather than actually think on its own and solve questions, write books and whatever. That's where you stand right now, right? So that's why you're not concerned. Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't
that's
think?
Why I'm not concerned, because it's just
Yeah, I see. So you wouldn't think that there would ever be some kind of interaction between AI and our brains? Like would our brains ever evolve in the same way as AI is evolving, or would they always be separate, kind of thing?
Yeah. So I mean, at the moment, the AI is just learning algorithms, which is part of what we do, part of what our brains do. It takes in information and stores it in our long-term memory. So it is part of what we do. But the bit that makes us intelligent, as far as I'm concerned, and I think most people would agree, is the fact that we can then take that information and come up with completely new ideas. People, like Henry Ford, came up with the combustion. Well, came up with a motor car, right? Everybody was riding around on horses, and then he came up with this completely new idea. The current algorithms that we've got, we'd never be able to do that. We'd never come up with a completely new thing out of nothing. It can combine different things, and so it can do things like that, but it can't actually come up with something completely new. And so it's never actually going to be acting independently.
Okay,
like
I see.
Intelligence could.
Okay.
Yeah. If we do get that, I'm going to get scared.
Yeah, I see that. But just to like add on what Evan said, what we want to also know, the usage now that we're using AI, right? I mean, just looking at technology in general from the 20th century, how before there was a lot of stuff that we would do with our brains, a lot of calculations, a lot of memorization, but more and more is being done by computers. So we're kind of using our brains less or in different ways. Do you think AI, the usage of AI could negatively affect the development and the evolution of the human brain? What would the human brain look like, 50, 100 years from now?
Yeah, I don't think it's because of AI. I think it's because of the use of the smartphones and devices and all these things that our brains are probably going to de-evolve. I mean, for the first time in history, we're actually getting dumber than we were 10 years ago. So up until now, since we had IQ tests every 5 years or so, they've had to adjust the IQ test because your average IQ has to be 100 because 100 is the average, and so they've had to make them harder. They've had to adjust them, and because we've been getting smarter and smarter and smarter until the last 10 years. And in the last 10 years, we've got dumber. And so they've actually had to adjust them back because we've actually got dumber over the last 10 years because of the use of devices. And we know we're getting less intelligent, right? School kids in Canada, in the US, in Australia, in the UK are now a year and a half behind when they finish year 12, when they finish their final year of school. They're a year and a half behind where they were 10 years ago. Yeah. So the kids that are leaving now wouldn't pass, well, would only just pass a year 10 and a half test, and they're equivalent to what a year at 10 and a half was 10 years ago. So we are getting dumber because of the fact that we're using all these devices, which is really bad. We're also getting things like early onset dementia is occurring more often now. So that's now, we're getting dementia much earlier now than we used to because of the fact that we're using devices all the time, because we're not actually using devices. I'll give you one simple example of that. If you use a Wayfinder app, which everyone uses the Wayfinder apps on their phone. So the Wayfinder app, gets you around. I won't say the names of them because I'll get in trouble. But the Wayfinder apps show you where to go when you actually want to go somewhere. And we know that if you use one of those Wayfinder apps, it's all regularly, then the area of your brain, the provocative place area, which has got all your maps in it, that area of the brain is actually smaller if you use one of those Wayfinder apps all the time, because you're not actually laying down the information, because you're not actually taking note of where you're going, all the landmarks and all of that. So that area is getting smaller. But the really scary thing is that area, the provocative place area, is connected to your hippocampus. And your hippocampus is your episodic memory. That's all the stuff that you actually did during the day. So it's connected to that because you actually connect your memories of what you did during the day to where how you actually got there, how you actually moved around and everything. So now it's been shown that if you use a Wayfinder app to say, go to the movies, you'll remember less about the movie than if you don't use a Wayfinder app to go to the movies. If you use your own Steam to actually go to the movies, you'll remember more about the movie. And they've shown with college students in the US, if you give them a Wayfinder app at the start of the when they first arrive at college versus giving them a paper map, after 6 months, the ones who got the Wayfinder app know less about the college, know less about the school that they've just started at. They have less friends at the school. They're less connected to the school. They don't actually they've got poorer mental health, and they're getting poorer marks because they don't remember their lectures as well, because they use the Wayfinder app to actually get to their lecture, to the lecture theatre. They then don't remember the lecture as well, so their marks are actually poorer if they use a Wayfinder app to get there. So, I mean, that's just one example of the things that we do now on devices, which is actually making us dumber. Content out there, right? And you already see that. I mean, the nonsense that you see out there in the world, it's actually been spewed out there in the last couple of months. It's been like mind-bogglingly dumb, and that's
AI is just going to accelerate that.
Rather than it's just churning out. Everyone's putting it on their websites. Everyone's using it to create content, and it's just mind-numbingly dumb. And so the content is going to get dumber, which means what we're reading is going to be dumber, which is also going to cause issues for our intelligence, because we're all going to which is, again, it's just another step backwards that we need to sort of kick up the arse and do something different.
You're making me want to take out the old school maps now and not use my my
Yeah, exactly. Should I not use Google Maps anymore?
Well, what I do is I look at home usually on my laptop. I'll look at where I'm going, and I'll note down,
And then
where
memorize
I
it.
go.
Ah, okay.
And then have it on a piece of paper, and then get there myself. Right, and you actually do get there yourself.
Oh, interesting.
And the cool thing is that
that.
if you delete those apps from your phone, occasionally you do get lost, which you might actually find somewhere new, which would be really cool. But also you've then got to ask someone how to get there, right? And that's actually really, really beneficial for us and for them, because you asking someone else, first they'll look at you really stunned as though you're from a foreign country, because nobody asks how to get anywhere anymore, because everyone's got the app, right? But then they'll actually go, oh, sorry, okay, I'll help you. They get a huge amount of positive neurotransmitters and positive chemicals and everything released because they're helping you. And you get a whole bunch of neurotransmitters and stuff released because you're actually looking at them and you're actually communicating with them and you're meeting someone new and everything. So it's actually really beneficial for both of you to actually just stop someone and say, hey, can you tell me where to go? And
So
then
it's
them
like
actually helping them. You give them a huge boost for their day.
So it's like forcing that interaction that we were kind of discussing earlier, right? Like the connection between two human beings is good
I
for
get
our
your
brains.
point
Yeah.
now. The connected species. That's the
Right.
whole point, I think, for your book as well. It's get out there, get connected.
Trent Harris, who used to work for Facebook, in one of his books, he talks about the fact that when he was working for Facebook, he came up with an idea that you put a little button on Facebook, which you press it and it'll then send a notification out to everybody who's close to you. So if you're in New York, for example, for the weekend, you press the button and then all of your connections that are in New York will get a little message saying, Trent's in New York at the moment, would you like to meet up and have a coffee or, do something social? And Facebook straight away said no, took it off the app and wouldn't actually release it, because they said, if you do that, then people are going to go out and meet each other, right? They're actually going to connect with each other. They're actually going to be social, and then they won't be on the app. And that's not what we want.
Yeah, so they're like
What we
working
need is
backwards.
people on the app.
Yeah.
So if we actually did things like that, we were much better off, because we would actually, connect with each other and spend time with each other. So we could use these things in good ways. We just need to get control of them and do them in ways that are beneficial for us.
Kind of like Snapchat has that, like that map where you see all your contacts and you know where they are. I don't know
Oh,
if you've seen that.
yeah. Yeah, it shows like where they're situated. Yeah.
So I guess they kept it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
They kept.
No. Exactly.
Yes. So back on the AI topic, I have one more philosophical question for you. Do you think that AI will eventually replace the human mind and have its own consciousness? Because a lot of people are worried about that. I have a feeling I know what your answer is going to be, but do you ever think that it would have its own subjective experiences and basically have almost like a mind of its own?
Well, yeah, at the moment computers are, and at the moment the way the programs are set up, no. If there's a shift and we go to quantum mechanics, if we're able to actually do something, or some sort of organic computer system, which there are companies working on, who knows, we might take that leap, but it will require a huge leap in what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we've got to actually get to that point. The current computers can't do it and won't be able to do it, we'll never be able to do it. But if we have that leap, then yes. But we're all getting dumber, means that we're probably never going to have that leap, right? We're probably going to end up all stretching our asses and not knowing what's going on.
Straighten our problems
because,
first.
everyone's getting dumber. So, but if we do have that leap, then yes. But not currently, not with what we've got currently.
Okay. Yeah. I think that'll make a lot of people feel better, because there's always that dystopian concern that AI is gonna take over one day.
Yeah, the whole Terminator
and all those movies that portray that.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah.
Okay, well, no, I was just gonna add, we see all these things with Terminators and whatnot, the AI taking over or killing us, but we're still at the control. If we don't create it or we don't program it in that way, why would it do that?
Yeah. Some people are worried that AI is going to create itself in a certain way. That
propagate itself. Yeah, but why would it? If the motives of interest behind it aren't, evil or bad. Yeah. But anyways, yeah.
No, I don't see it happening now. But if we ended up with an organic system, or if we ended up with some sort of quantum system, then maybe. But yeah, not to worry about yet. But yeah, you mentioned before also VR, which I was involved in developing a lot of the VR originally, and I've used it for both diagnosis and for treatment of eating disorders, which is a really interesting area and a great thing to actually use. But I've been on a few think tanks, and one of the things that I think are really interesting, and sadly we're not trying to develop as quickly as we can, is augmented reality. So there's a difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. And with virtual reality, of course, you have the headset on, and so you're in the world. Whereas with augmented reality, you have normal glasses on, and you see your normal world, and then you can augment it. You can make it more special in some way or whatever. And so there's some great research now, and there are some of these glasses out there where you can do things like you guys, sitting there now, one of you could decide that you want all the room painted blue, and the other one could decide I want all the room painted green, and you would both see it that way. So one would see it blue, and would see it blue, and Evan would see it green, or whatever you actually want. And you could actually both, you and your partner at home, and you what you one program, and she likes another program, or he likes another program, and so you can actually sit there and watch the same TV, but one of you is watching one program and the other one's watching the other program without any problems at all, because you're seeing it on your glasses. You're seeing the world as it actually is, but you're seeing it different. And it could actually be really, really good for people who live alone, who are lonely, because you can actually have a hologram of the other person sitting there. So even though they're not there, they could be sitting there chatting to you, and then they could be sitting at their home and actually chatting. You could be chatting to them in their home, and you could be sitting in their home. So that, I think, augmented reality would be really, really cool, and would actually help and benefit society in lots and lots of different ways. And I could just now, if I had the glasses on, go, give me another computer, and it could set up another computer just here for me, which is and I could do programming and do everything I want, but it's actually not, the keyboard and stuff's not here, and you wouldn't see it, but I would see it, and I could do whatever I want, and all these things. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it, some of the videos that are out there. Now, the problem, of course, is that the technology, the multinational technology companies don't want that stuff developed. I don't think they want that stuff developed, because you're in the real world and you're actually interacting with people, and you're not on their devices, right? Whereas they want to develop virtual reality so they can have things like the metaverse, so they can actually get you
that's what I was going to mention,
and stuck in there, so that they can actually and so they're all developing the VR, which isn't actually very beneficial, and actually is bad for you for multiple reasons, including the vision. It's really bad for your vision. It's really bad for your vestibular system. Whereas they could be developing the augmented reality, which would be really beneficial for society.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, real connection should be the priority.
Yeah.
And actually being physically.
Absolutely. 100%.
So yeah, I mean, this whole talk with AI, I think, was pretty cool. It's some philosophical questions there, and it relates a bit to our brain health and how the evolution of the brain would go about. Now to talk about for some solutions and some techniques that people can use, right? Because I think you also offer certain brain hacks that people can use to improve their brain health. So how can people get away from these addictive technologies? Because we know that they are designed that way, right? And sometimes I'm guilty of it. I just open my phone, and then 10 minutes later I'm like, where was I? It was almost like my brain was my brain was shut off. Kind of like similar to how you said where we use GPS devices. Just the fact of you using it makes you not present in the moment to experience and record that information. So how can people just detach from that addictive nature of these devices, use it in a mindful way, and just find that balance?
It's a great question. My first tip is always to download one of those health apps onto the phone, which not the ones that monitor your steps or anything like that. By the way, did you know that people who get those step counters are more likely to put on weight after they get the step counters than when they actually...
Yeah, because they rely on that, and
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know.
Crazy, right? Yeah. But
I think that makes sense.
That was an aside. Sorry about that. I always find that really funny. Technology is supposed to improve our health, but actually makes it worse. So yeah, one of the things is I'd put one of those apps on your phone and on all your devices that actually monitors what you're actually doing on the phone, on the device, and then monitor that each week. So each week have a look at it and see what you're actually doing, because it's surprising, it surprises most people when they do that, how much time they actually spend on Facebook, or how much time they spend on YouTube, or how much time they spend on these sorts of things. And when you see that after a week, you've spent 12 hours on Facebook, you go, shit, do I really need to be spending that much of my life, right? Because your time is actually your life, right? Your life is actually made up of your time, and you're giving that much of your life to these companies. So doing that's really good. If you've got kids, I actually do it with my kids. I have teenagers, and all of us have it on all of our devices, and then at the end of each week we all look at it together. And I'm usually the worst one because I work at home and I'm self-employed now, and so I spend a lot of time on devices. My daughter will go, "Hey, Dad, did you really need to spend that much time on LinkedIn this week or whatever?" And it's really good for her because she gets to chastise me, and I get to
she's
go,
keeping you in check.
It's pretty embarrassing. Keeping me in check, yeah, right. But it also keeps her in check because she's like, she wants to beat me, right? She wants to be on the device less than I am, which is awesome. Because that's what I want as well, right?
Competition.
And so that's a really good way to do it as well. Is keeping keeping everybody in the household in check. I love that, and it's a great way to interact with your kids, especially teenagers, because they do love to tell you what to do. Which is good. Another thing is turn off all your notifications. So those little numbers that come up on your email when you're on your laptop. Each time one of those little numbers comes up, it captures your attention. And each attention's captured, you lose the last 90 seconds of whatever you were doing. So every time you get a buzz on your phone, or every time you get a little thing icon come up on your computer, or every time you get some sort of notification on your computer or your laptop or your phone or anything else, if you don't look at it, you lose the last 90 seconds of your time. And you imagine how many times that actually happens during the day and how much time you're actually losing every single day. And that's if you've got the self-control not to look at whatever it was that just popped up. So that's a great way to actually get back time and get back some of your sanity, if you like. And then what you do is you schedule into your day when you're actually going to check your email, and when you're going to check LinkedIn, and when you're going to check your Facebook, or whatever you want to do, whatever you need to do on a daily basis. And you set a timer and you have an alarm go off. So you have the alarm go off. So you say, all right, I'm going to look at LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot because I post on LinkedIn. I have a lot of contacts on LinkedIn. So I'll set an alarm of 15 minutes so that I don't get sucked into that whole thing. And I'll go on twice a day to actually look at stuff and to post stuff and to respond to stuff and all the rest of it. But only for 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night. And that controls that. So I have control over that. And it's been shown that even your email, if you do that with your email, get rid of all your notifications for your email and just schedule in the day when you're actually going to look at your email 2 times a day or 3 times a day, and it will improve your mental health within 2 weeks. 2 weeks of doing that actually improves your mental health because you're not constantly getting distracted by your email little icons coming up. So that's another.
It creates anxiety.
What is it? What is it?
Yeah.
Just always.
I think that I've heard that tip for like people that are sucked in the pornography thing, right? A lot of people are addicted to it, and like people say like lay off it for 2 weeks, and you'll get back to kind of that balance as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, if you are really, if you really need, if you don't have sex somewhere else and you need the pornography for that, then again, give yourself a timer, put a timer on, so I can do it once a week or twice a week or whatever, and it's only for 15 minutes, and have an alarm go off, or something. Maybe with pornography you need to have an electric shock on your arm or something to stop it. But yes,
I think it should be more stricter.
Something to tell you to stop. To stop. Yeah. And then there's a Pomodoro technique, which I work with all my clients with, and it doesn't matter your age. I don't know if you've heard of that. Have you heard of the Pomodoro technique?
I've heard of it. I'm not super familiar.
I haven't heard of it.
Okay, so this is been shown to be the most productive way you can actually spend your day. It's called Pomodoro because it was originally studied by a bunch of Italian scientists, and they use these tomato timers. So Pomodoro
Tomatoes, right?
Tomato in Italian. Yeah.
Oh, pomodoro.
So they use these little timers that
yeah.
are shaped like tomatoes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So they're really cool. And what they've shown is that if you set a timer for 25 minutes and you have the timer there so you can actually see it counting down, and you focus on one thing, you get rid of all distractions, your phone, everything else, and you just focus on one thing for that 25 minutes. And then when the 25 minutes is up and it buzzes, or straight away you've got to get up and move, either do squats or do push-ups, or keep it fit as well. But move, don't do anything else, and then after the 5 minutes, go back to what you were doing and do it for another 25 minutes. And if you do that 4 times, then that's 2 hours, and that's been shown to be the most productive way to actually spend your time. But it also exercises your attention span. So, kids especially, but all of us have a problem with our attention because we're constantly being distracted by things.
I know.
And you need to work that muscle, right? Again, like any other muscle, any ability in your brain, you got to work it to actually make it stronger. And so if you're doing that, if you're concentrating on one thing for 25 minutes, it'll actually exercise your attention network, which means that you'll be better at not being distracted by other things in other parts of your life as well, which is awesome for you and for everyone else. And I've worked with kids with ADHD, with kids in schools where they've been truants and they've not been going to school. And so we start with the timer for 1 minute, and then we just slowly build it up because, you want to exercise. Same you do, with any other exercise. You start easy and then you slowly build it up. And I've had kids who couldn't sit in class for more than 2 or 3 minutes, who've constantly been sent out of the class because they're distracted, who are now able to sit in class for 20 minutes at a time, concentrating, and actually want to go to school because they're actually learning and they're actually contributing to the class and they're part of the class and they're not distracting the other kids. So, it works with kids and it works with us as adults, and it exercises your attentional network so that you're actually able to sustain attention in other environments, like in a classroom or whatever, but also gets shit done, right? So I do it every day for 2 hours, and I get more done during that than I do during the rest of the day because I get shit done during that 2 hours, and then the rest of the day is quite chaotic.
Yeah. That's kind of what I like about these long podcasts too, right? Like you got to stay focused on the conversation for the whole time, and that forces you to practice your brain at staying focused, right? And not looking at your phone and doing things like that.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's really good for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of things about, meditation and, just kind of like staying in the moment. Do you recommend that as well for kind of putting yourself back into that focused mode?
Being in the present.
Yeah, it's a great question. So meditation's tough one to do properly. There's a whole bunch of apps that you can download, but if you're using an app, then you're not meditating because you've got an app telling you what to do, which means you're actually concentrating on the app, which means that you're not actually meditating, because to meditate, you've got to get completely within your own. I have had periods where I've been able to meditate properly for periods of time, but I find it more difficult. I surf, so surfing I find is almost meditative because you're sitting out there in the ocean waiting for the waves to come and you're just bobbing up and down, and you get into this really neat rhythm, which is really cool. And that's my way of resetting myself. I also go for walks with friends and stuff quite regularly because I think that's a really good way to actually just reset yourself. But I think it's important to find your way of relaxing.
Right.
If you're capable of meditating, awesome, and it's been shown to be really beneficial. But I don't think everybody's capable of doing it, and so saying you should all meditate, it's a really hard thing to do, thing to do properly. And it takes a lot of practice and a lot of control. And many years to actually do it properly. So if you can do it, awesome, thumbs up, and it is really good for you. But I think most people would struggle, and there's other things you can do.
I heard I don't know if you know Dr. Andrew Huberman. He said something about kind of just almost looking into the distance and just don't think about anything for 20 minutes. I've been trying to do that recently, and it's really hard. When I started doing the exercise, I realized how many thoughts come into my head without me wanting them to be there. So it's a really good exercise just to almost think of nothing, because we're always used to thinking of something.
But it's hard though. I think
it's really hard. Yeah.
I think meditation in general, it's not to be thoughtless, like not have any thoughts. You're bound to have it. It's just to be present, accepted, and just focus on one thing. Like I've heard like simple meditation technique where it's like, rub your hand and just feel that, just focus on that, or just breathe and just focus on the breathing. Just be present, or do an activity that you're present in, such as surfing.
Yeah, get away from the devices. Do something to get away from the devices. I know
get away from the devices.
Bike ride.
That's meditation.
We have a whole bunch of bike riders around here, right? That's also a great meditative thing, right? Because you're just pedaling, right? And you're just concentrating on nothing but trying to, pedal or whatever, or runners. I know people who run regularly. And there's lots of things you can do which are sort of like meditating, but are really good for you and really healthy. And so, find your thing and do that, but make sure it's something that's healthy and get you away from the devices and gets you into nature. Whatever it happens to be. Go walking, go hiking, climbing mountains, whatever floats your boat. But do something, which is rewarding.
Great. Yeah. So do you have any other hacks, or do we cover most of them?
We went through the getting rid of the notifications. Another thing I do is I put on the front of my smartphone a message, so you can put different pictures and everything on the front of the smartphone before you unlock it. So I have on that, think about it before you open it, which just reminds me that I should think about it before I open it. So before I actually swipe and put in the thing, it comes up with this, think about it before you, and I go, I don't really need to. You were saying before, you keep getting distracted and just mindlessly looking at your smartphone. If you had that there, you might go, true, put it away, and I'll keep concentrating. And after a while, you stop picking it up and you actually have something.
Is that like your background image you're saying? Or what is that message?
The locked. Yeah, the lock
screen.
The lock screen. You can change the lock screen to whatever screen you want, and so I just put on there. I don't have my phone here. I keep it inside when I'm doing podcasts, so I can't show you. So I put on the lock screen. I put on the lock screen. And just a message to myself. It could be whatever, but something to remind you that you got to think about it before you do it, because we do it habitually, right? It's not something we think about, and we have to remember that. Between 40 and 60% of what we do during the day is habit-based. It's habitual. It's stuff that we don't think about when we actually do it. We just do it automatically. And that's why we do things like that. We pick up our phone and look at it, or we look at our email, or we do these things habitually and we're not thinking about it. So we've got to stop ourselves and actually think about it before we do it, and then we probably won't do it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very good points for sure. Yeah, so I think we've been going on for over an hour and a half now. So we'd like to thank you for coming on. We really appreciate your time. So why don't you go ahead and tell people where they could find you, tell them a little bit more about your book, and just that.
Oh, thank you guys. So you can find me at drmarkwilliams.com. So it's just DR and then markwilliams.com, nice and easy. There's lots of stuff on there that you can download or have a look at, and I update it regularly, or you can sign up to my newsletter, which is completely free, and you just get a newsletter from me once a month with ideas and tricks and books that I think you should read, or that I've been reading and so on. If you want to do that, that'd be great. And then my book is on it's pre-order now. It'll be out soon, so you can pre-order it go to my website. There's then a link to all of the different bookstores you can go to, and it's on the fact that we are the connected species. It's for a general audience. There's tips and tricks at the end of each chapter to actually help you improve your mental health and improve your connection with everyone around you. But it just explains what we've talked about today. A lot of what we've talked about today. It explains how the brain works, which we haven't talked about, but which is really interesting. A couple of chapters on that, and then how our evolution of our brain to be connected, and how important it is to keep it healthy, and then how to actually keep it healthy by spending more time with people. And then it goes through how tech companies and how modern society get better control over all of that, and how we can do that as a society, and hopefully we can improve things for everybody. So, but lots of practical stuff, but also a bit of extra knowledge for everyone, so that we can actually move forward and be more connected, hang out with each other more, and actually benefit everybody rather than benefiting a small number of
that's
very
great.
wealthy billionaires.
Exactly. It's a good message. So the book will be coming out worldwide August 15th, right, this year?
That's right. Yeah, it'll be out August 15th. So if you pre-order it now, you'll be one of the first to get it. They tell me that you'll get it before the date, which is pretty cool. So yeah, if you want to get it before the date, you can pre-order it now,
That's
or
great.
you can wait until it's actually out.
Great.
But yeah, August 15th.
Wow, thanks, Mark. I mean, the discussion was
That
fascinating.
was really great.
It should be cool.
Yeah,
Hopefully
that
we'll
was
change
a really
the
great
world. Hey, guys.
discussion. We thank you for coming on.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's been awesome. You've been really good.